think there may be some other people joining. I was just about to remind us to do that, Ellie. So thank you. So just to mention to everyone, the event is going to be recorded, but not the questions at the end. So it's absolutely fine to not have cameras on. But when we do have questions, obviously you can turn them on then. So, firstly, good afternoon and welcome to the seminar on the public-private mix in pensions, a comparative perspective. We're really pleased that you've been able to join us for this event. Now, the seminar is organised by the UK Social Policy Association, who sponsor the Social Policy Association Pensions Policy Working Group that we're part of. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Liam Foster, and I'm a professor in social policy at the University of Sheffield. And I'm one of the three founders of the Pensions Policy Group. And I'll say a bit more about the group shortly. So in addition, I want to thank the SPA for their support and also thank CASM at the University of Birmingham for assisting with the organisation of the event. So in terms of today's session, we're really pleased to bring together leading experts in the field to engage in stimulating discussions on pensions systems. We're aware that pensions have evolved in diverse ways in different countries and regions, and that there's much to learn by comparing different approaches, especially the mix between public and private pensions. Therefore, this event brings together academics from various countries, including the UK, to discuss and explore the balance between public and private pension systems and how they've developed. So we're fortunate to have three speakers today. We have Art-Jan Reijhoff, who's a senior researcher at the Finnish Centre for Pensions, who's going to focus on pensions in Finland, a typical case of public crowding out private. They've done lots of work on social inequalities in work and retirement, labour market mobility across a life course, and also the political economy of the labour market and pensions reforms. Then we're going to have a presentation by Dirk Hofke, who's a professor of quantitative methods of empirical social research at the University of Duisburg-Essen. And he's going to be discussing the unfinished privatization of the German pension system. And Dirk's written extensively about employment in later life, pensions, inequalities in Germany and beyond. And he recently edited an excellent collection on social exclusion of youth in Europe, the multifaceted consequences of labour market insecurity. So it kind of shows that life course perspective. And our final act is Trotte Meijer, who's a professor of social policy at the University of Southampton. And they're going to be discussing pension reform and pension adequacy in the UK from 1993 to 2020, a comparative European perspective. They've written much renowned work in the field, contributing to comparative welfare research in Europe, and in particular on the role of private agents as social policy players in European pension regimes. So I think we're really lucky to have three excellent speakers who've been kind enough to give up their time. So each presentation will be between kind of 15 and 20 minutes. If people have burning questions for clarification at the end of somebody's presentation, put your hand up or put it in the chat and they can address it. But we want to kind of leave time at the end for questions and have our kind of questions at the end, really. And some of those questions might be for individual panelists, or indeed it might be a question which is relevant to all. And again, it'll be a case of using chat function or indeed putting hands up. The other thing I probably should say in relation to this is I'm not a Zoom person normally. So if things go wrong, we've got other competent people here like Ellie who can assist in terms of technology. So apologies if I do something press the wrong button or something. Or indeed, if my cat comes in, Bertie, and treads on the keyboard at some point, which is also another possibility. Before I hand over to the first speaker, I just want to say a little bit about the Pension Social Policy Group that we're part of. So it's led by myself, Hayley James and Ellie Sue, and you can see our email addresses on the slide. If you're interested in finding out more or being added to the mailing list about the group, please do contact one of us and we can add you to the group. And it's worth noting that the membership of the group includes academics and non-academics who are interested in pensions. So please feel free to get in touch. And we really want to basically connect people who are interested in pensions and doing work in this area of all different stages of their careers, and learn from each other and potentially put together research beds, but also thinking about teaching. We have meetings around particular discussion points. So we had one on the winter fuel allowance not so long ago, symposia at the SPA conference, and events such as this. If you look on the SPA Pensions Policy Group web pages, again, you can see the link on the slide here. You can find out more about the group, and there's an extensive reference list, for instance, in relation to pensions. And we're also in the process of developing some teaching resources that might be useful for people. So I think that's probably enough of me waffling on, and it's time to hand over to our first speaker. So I'll invite Art-Jan Reekhoff to put up his slides, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you all for having me today here. Let's see if I get this to work. Yes, I'm also not a Zoom user. Our organization doesn't allow it on our computers, so this is new for me as well. But yeah, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I will be talking a bit about the pension system in Finland. So the topic that was proposed was in a way interesting to me because when you talk about the Finnish system, then you really talk about statutory, so public pension system and with almost no private pensions at all. But I guess this makes maybe a nice contrast to the other countries that will be discussed today. So, so in this sense, I think if you think about the developments that have been going on in pension reforms during the past decades, going back maybe to the World Bank's Averting the Old Age Crisis report from the early 1990s, then Finnish system has been kind of going against the grain of what is nowadays conventional pension wisdom. The World Bank wanted us all to have three-pillar systems, where one pillar, the first one, might be publicly funded or public, where the other ones should be basically private. So the second one, this employer subsidized supplementary pension, and then a third one, which is then a voluntary private pension. But these basically don't exist, those last two pillars. So the focus in Finland is almost entirely on the first pillar. And then another thing is that since the 90s, we all, started to think that maybe defined benefit systems are not such a good idea, in this aging society, and a lot of countries have switched, including many of the Nordic countries have switched to some form of defined contribution. Also, Finland has not gone in that direction, and so we almost have no private pensions here in Finland, and that's maybe a bit odd. And it's maybe even more odd since Finland, the Finnish pension system, has been ranked as one of the best pension systems in the world for the past few years. So I'm showing here the ranking from last year's Mercer global pension index, and Finland is at number 7, and it has dropped a few places in the last few years. I think the highest it was at some point was when it was at the 3rd place. So it's doing something well. So is this the typical case of the bumblebee, the being that is like physically should not be able to fly, but still it's flying, it's keeping up in the air, while Finland also has one of the fastest aging societies in Europe. So how does that work? How does this how does it continue to keep going? And so I'll talk a bit about this, and I also talk about, so in this kind of system, what is then the room for adjustment for pensions when they are statutory and defined benefit, and you cannot pour everything into, okay, we're just gonna say how much you contribute, and we don't really say much about how much you will get in the end, and we also don't want you to rely on private pensions for your economic well-being in old age. So try to keep this brief a bit. The Finnish old age pension system in a nutshell. So the most important pension in Finland, you should understand. So if we talk only about when we talk about statutory pensions, and basically what is only a kind of a first pillar system, but the most important pension is the statutory earnings related pension. So it's an earnings related pension with a defined benefit. It accrues with 1.5% of annual earnings for basically any work that you perform during the life course, from age 17 onwards. You contribute about 25%, which is in the private sector, a little bit different in the public sector. And this contribution is shared between employers and employees. It's partially funded, meaning there's a mix of pay-as-you-go and funding. So part of the contributions, they are used to pay current pensions, and part goes into pension assets, so is being invested and will then return. So it's collectively invested, and so part of the returns on that is then again used to finance pensions. Currently, the retirement age has reached 65. It has been slowly increasing since 2018, and by 2030, it will be linked to life expectancy. So, and these statutory earnings-related pensions, they are administered by pension insurance companies and pension funds. And one thing important still to say for the pension benefits, so there is no ceiling on the benefits, which means that how much you accrue in terms of pensions is also how much you will be paid out. So there's no cap in the end that you only get part of the pensions that you have accrued. Now, these days, a bit less important is the national pension. That's kind of the second type of pension that we have, and it is this kind of more typical pension, which is financed by taxes, and depends on residency. So in that sense, it's more of a Beverigian pension, but it is not something that everyone gets. So it's not a basic pension, but the benefit level depends on the level of the earnings related pension. And I will show in a moment what that means. The retirement age is and has been for a long time already at age 65, so you can claim that only at 65, and it's administered by a different institution. So it's administered by the social insurance institution, which is more governed by the law and falls under the parliament, whereas the earnings related pension system is more in the kind of the free market, let's say. So this shows a bit how the national pension and the earnings-related pension relate to each other. So if you receive earnings-related pensions below a certain level, it gets topped up by the national pension, and for the lowest pension incomes, there is a guaranteed pension. So there's a floor to to your pension, which was in 2024 977 euros per month, which is the guarantee pension. So basically, for each euro of earnings-related pension that you receive, it reduces the national pension by 50 cents until you reach a level of about 1,500 euros per month. And then from then on, you don't receive national pension at all anymore. So it's basically a way to redistribute to lower incomes. Yeah, pension income is taxed, but for lower, there's this tax-free part. So meaning for the lower incomes, you basically don't pay taxes, but once your pensions get higher, you have to pay taxes over it. And there's also housing allowance, which is not a pension, but it's an important source of income for many pensioners in Finland. So kind of, I can tell you also that, Finland used to have this kind of beverage and basic pension for everyone, and that was reformed already in the 1990s. So they got rid of it and they replaced it with this national pension, which is a top up to the earnings-related pension. But since the earnings-related pension system has also been maturing over the years, so it has gained in significance in people's pension income. So nowadays, around 2/3 of pensioners only receive earnings-related pension, and 5% only receive a national pension. So that's quite a small share. But it's clearly that the earnings-related pension is doing a good job because it's providing most people with a decent level of income in retirement. Then, so are there no private pensions at all? Well, there are some, but statutory pensions are about 95% of total pension provision, so it's a really small share. There are employer-specific supplementary pensions, and even around 25% of people working in the private sector get them from their employers, or their employers contribute to something, but still it's only less than 4% of all the pensions paid. And then there are individual private pensions. So you can decide yourself. You take a pension insurance with an insurance company, for example. But they are strictly voluntary and they have declined in popularity in recent years. And now this week, the government even decided that tax exemptions for private pension contributions will be removed by 2027. So they make it even less attractive for people to build up their private pensions. What does that do in terms of benefits? So the Finnish pension system is kind of built in a way that it aims at a replacement rate of when you retire of about 60% of your income. So you have a 1.5% accrual rate per year, which means that if you have worked 40 years, then you have 60% of your income during your working life as a pension. That's the kind of the thought behind it. And that replacement rate, if you look at these numbers by OECD, they calculated like what does it mean? What are the gross replacement rates for low earner, average earner, and high earner? Then it's pretty correct. Then in Finland, at each income level, you get about 60% of your income as a pension benefit. So what important role here plays the lack of a benefit ceiling. So there is no so even people with very high incomes also get very high pensions. So there's no redistribution there from higher pension incomes to lower pension incomes. As you, I put some other countries here, other Nordic countries, for example, and the Netherlands. So Denmark and the Netherlands, of course, these kind of countries which have a pretty high basic pension also, which you can see that those with lower incomes, they get a much higher replacement rate. Norway has a similar system as Finland. They also have this kind of guarantee pension, but the level of that is much higher than in Finland. So that seems to then redistribute much more to the lower incomes, whereas Norway also has more kind of employer the occupational pensions, which kind of also and also more voluntary pensions, which are not here displayed in these replacement rates, because this is only for mandatory pensions. And in Sweden, you see that the higher incomes are a bit better off under their system than in Finland. So what does it mean if you have defined benefit? Then how do you adjust your pension system? So the main adjustments is if you cannot just adjust the benefit according to how your population, how your economy develops, then you cannot adjust your benefits just like that unless you introduce some kind of reform or have some indexing. So the main contribution takes place through people's contribution rates, which is problematic, of course, because it's not very popular among employers, but also not employees, that if that they have to pay huge contributions to the pensions. As you see, the colleagues of mine are doing these kind of scenarios all the time, and the contribution rate is now about 25%. The pessimistic scenario is that it might go above 30 towards 35 somewhere in the future, if we stick to current fertility rates and low immigration and so on and so on. So this is a problem for the system, and this is somehow something that is constantly like in our mind here in Finland, that how do we deal with this? So another adjustment rate or another means of adjustment mechanism or means of adjusting is it's of course not everything is kind of public, or not everything is defined by the state or by the social partners in Finland. So there's also flexibility because it's a partially funded system. So meaning that part of the pension contributions are invested, and if you have higher return rates on your investments, then your pension system is also in a better shape. So as you can see here, Finland, all the pension assets are in the first pillar, which is the blue color here, and it's quite a big share. It's not as big as the big countries like Norway and Denmark and Netherlands, who have huge pension assets, but it's still quite large compared to many other countries, and everything is in the first pillar. Another part of what should create some kind of adjustment is that there's some marketization. So it means that there's competition between pension providers, which so there are 4 large pension insurance companies and then several pension funds, and the public sector has their own pension provider. So they are supposed to compete, but the funny thing is it's a bit difficult to compete if you have to provide the same product and the same price for that product to everyone, because that's what's set in the rules. But they compete on quality of the services that they provide, and in the end, if they are doing well on their investments, on their assets, they are allowed to pay out their customers, which are the employers usually who they insure in the end, because the employers have to take the pension insurance for their employees. So they can pay their customers some kind of bonuses, which can be seen as a kind of reduction in their contribution rates. So I guess I'm running out of time, but the pension system has been trying to adjust, and we have about every 10 years they say there's a pension reform in Finland, and that's what we have what they have been doing. In the last pension reform that was just negotiated last year, and of which the results now came out at the beginning of this year, they tried to get they want to allow pension companies to take more risks on their investments, which would then allow the pension system to adjust, and also have an inflation stabilizer for benefits. So if inflation rises really much, and because benefits are linked to price levels, then the benefits won't increase as much with inflation as they normally would. So, but I guess I'll leave it at here. So we see very little in private pensions in Finland. I don't expect anything to change in that sense also in the future. And there are other ways for this kind of pension system as we have in Finland to adjust to the big challenges of aging societies that are going on at the moment. Yes, thank you, and sorry for talking too long.
No, good timing. That was good timing, Artyom. Thank you very much. Has anybody got any quick points for clarification they need at all? If not, we'll move on in a second. I can't see any hands up or anything in the chat at this point. So yeah, I'd like to thank you very much, Artyom, for an interesting talk. So thank you. And we'll move on now to our next speaker, Dirk Hofke, please. Thank you.
Okay, just trying to put my slides on, which hopefully works now. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank also the SPA very much for inviting me to giving a very broad overview on the German pension systems within the next, hopefully, not more than 20 minutes. And I just give you a short overview of what I'm going to be talking today. I'm going to have this underlying hypothesis of an unfinished privatization of the German pension system. So if we look at the public-private mix, Germany has long been known for being a very publicly dominated pension system. I will argue that even though there have been a number of reforms, this picture has not generally changed in a sense. So we are somehow in the middle between the public system becoming more multipolarized, but not really at the end of this process. What am I going to do in the next 20 minutes? I'm going to give you a very, very short overview of some historical markers in German pensions, because I think they can be helpful to understand the development in German pensions and in the different pillars within the German pension systems. And I'm going to give you an overview about the current state of the art in the German pension system. So I'm going to show you which role the different pillars, public pensions, occupational pensions, and private pensions play, and how they are organized in a very general sense. And I will then finally go into some more recent trends, so reforms that have been undertaken within the last decade or so, and current reform discussions. And current reform discussions are really very current in Germany. As you may know, we have just had elections, and we have currently having coalition talks between the Conservatives and the Social Democrats. And of course, pension policies are also an issue there, and I will try to build a few of these discussions in when discussing basically the outlook into what might happen in the future and which reforms or which developments can be expected for the years to come. Now, starting very general with basically the historical overview, Germany is always being, sorry, can you still see the presentation?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Okay, I just have to see it myself at the moment. Sorry. Okay, here we are. Germany is often referred to as being a really Bismarckian system. So dating back to first Otto von Bismarck in the 1890s, which introduced basically the first public pension scheme in Germany in 1889, against basically the background of a rather explosive social situation, early industrialization, the uprising social question, which demanded for a solution for the bad living situation of workers at that time. And the state answer to that was basically a system that provided for the first time really basic protection for workers. It was later also opened to clerks, for example, but it provided only a very limited protection against basic social risks, and it was not the first system back actually on the pension market. There were already occupational pensions before. Big German industrial firms already had provided rather comprehensive occupational schemes, and the public pension scheme that was introduced by Bismarck was actually rather a top-up for people who were basically already in this occupational pensions before. It was very low, and it was only paid after age 70, which many people didn't actually have. But it was basically a public pension system that was then significantly expanded in the 1960s, a time that has often been referred to as the German economic miracle time. So the Volkswagen, which you can see, is kind of symbolic for this area. This is a time where then the German pension system, after having been extended over the previous decades, already now became very generous, and it moved from this idea of basically a protection against basic social risks more towards status maintenance through public pensions, and in a very clear family model that was dominant at that time, namely the male breadwinner model. So pensions were paid to the husband, which then was intended to support the family even in old age through these pensions to the male breadwinner in the household. The idea of German pensions was that of a generational contract. So what was practiced was the pay-as-you-go system, in which the working age generation then actually supported current pensioners. So it's not a funded, but rather actually a contribution-based system following the pay-as-you-go principle. This worked then for another 2 or 3 decades until the next marker, which I would like to highlight, the 1970s and 80s, when we had the economic crisis, not only in Germany due to general market disruptions like the oil crisis, mass unemployment, which was present at that time. And Germany reacted in a very similar way as many other societies by promoting early retirement schemes to take pressure from the labor market, by a concerted action of, on the one hand, the public pension scheme and the occupational policies, actually. So both provided often what was called a golden handshake to employees to leave early retirement. And then in the 1990s, this was increasingly considered as basically unsustainable due to foreseeable demographic aging, which then led to substantial pension reforms to promote longer working lives in Germany. I think both is important to know, the active aging, in order to see where German pension policies have been moving in the last years. So particularly when looking at what pension reforms were implemented, but also that it is very clear that in the decades before in Germany, people were used to a completely other pension system. So working up to age 60, leaving early, and now the normal retirement age has moved up clearly to 67. Currently, we're discussing about 60, 90, or 70. So that has been really a fundamental change within a period of just 1 or 2 decades. So that maybe just as a background. Before I now turn to the present and the situation in the German pension system. This is the current structure of a normal German old age income, which is averaged across all pensioners, based here by data from the German Ministry for Labor and Social Affairs. And what you can clearly see, basically, if you look at which percentage is actually responsible for which share of an older person's income in Germany, is that we still have a very dominant public pension. 53% of average German old age income still come from public pensions. And if you look at this yellow part of this diagram, of this circle diagram, these with labels with 17%. This refers to other old age security programs, which basically also includes a German social security program for actually public sector workers. So in a sense, you can add this also to the public pension, so to what is normally called the first pillar in pension. So that really makes up a very large percentage of income in old age. Notably, a lot of income in old age, at least comparing it to the previous decades, 13% come from actually earned income. So this active aging policy has pushed many employees back into work even at or after retirement ages. So still quite a decent percentage still comes from earned income. And the other second and third pillar pensions play a comparatively low role. If you look, for example, at the occupational pensions, it's kind of orange part of this diagram that makes up just 7%. And if we look at private fundings, private funded pensions with 6%, it's comparatively low. So in a sense, it's still a very first pillar dominated system in Germany. And we are going to look into these pillars now in a bit more detail to see what is behind it and maybe what are also the reasons of this still very unbalanced picture in terms of public private pension provision. First, looking at public pensions, as said, it is a universal system for employees, so not only workers, but also clerks, but not automatically for the self-employed. They can opt into the German public pension system, but they are not automatically covered, and it does not include public sector workers, which have their own pension system in Germany, which I just referred to when going through the diagram I just showed you. Both together cover about 80 to 90% of the population, and these public pensions are financed by joint contributions by both employees and employers, and they follow later outcomes basically follow the equivalence principle of contributions to benefits. So the more you pay in and the longer you pay in, the more pension benefits you will get out of the system in general. So in a sense, this is no strong redistributive component, which we have in the German pension system, but rather a very strong insurance-based component, which leads to a situation in which people with lower contributions or with not long contributions usually end up also with lower pension benefits, which then can become a problem, particularly for this group. Nonetheless, for this group, the lower educated, the lower earning people in Germany, it is still the largest source of old age income, despite being comparatively low, simply because second and third pillar pensions are not very frequent among this group. And I'm going to show that to you in a few minutes, also using some numbers. Replacement rates have been constantly declining. We are clearly below the finish rate, which Art-Jan just showed you, currently at around 48% wage replacement, and it's expected to fall in the years to come. And not least due to this trend, there has been an increasing concern within the German population about old age poverty, which is currently still already at 20% of people being at risk of income poverty in old age, and which has been rising throughout the last year. So there's an increasing concern about future income security looking at public pensions only. Occupational pensions, as mentioned, have had basically already a long tradition. They were introduced by employers even before public pensions were introduced by Bismarck earlier on, but they were really company initiatives. It was never a universal or a mandatory system, but they were early used as a human resources tool. So companies use them to bind their employees to them, to keep actually qualified employees within their own company by offering them occupational pensions. And this actually, even though there have been a lot of changes, still has been a logic, I think, over the last decades in the German pension system, that it's not really kind of a general system covering all employees. It covers about half of the population in Germany, of employees in Germany, but this half for them, it's often offered as a kind of a human resources tool. In order to make it a bit more widespread against the background of demographic aging, there have been reforms. One which I'm mentioning here is the so-called Entgeltumwandlung, or if one translates it literally into English, the wage conversion reform. The idea here is basically that occupational pension should not be restricted to a certain group of employees which are particularly valued by their employers, but that it should actually be extended to all employees which are somehow under collective agreements. And these reforms in the early 2000s actually allowed employees to go to their employer and demand an investment of their wages into pension funds, which are then exempt from taxes and social security contributions. So in a sense, it's a bit of the opposite to the British idea of a general inclusion into an occupational pension systems, and then employees can opt out. But it's rather the other way around in Germany, that actually everybody has a right to occupational pensions, but they have to demand it by themselves. And employers are not obliged to inform actually their employees about this right. So in a sense, while there's the opportunity of opting out in the UK, we have this opportunity of opting in rather in the German system, if one wants to say it like that. Due to that, we still have a lot of inequalities in coverage by occupational pensions. Even though half of the German population is covered, we see several dimensions of social inequalities. Low earners usually have a lower percentage of occupational pensions than high earners. Women are having lesser pensions than men. East Germans are having lesser occupational pensions than West Germans, and particularly employees in large firms have good access to that, while small firms, small-sized firms, medium-sized firms are actually areas where these occupational pensions are rather not this widespread yet. Finally, turning to the third pillar, private pensions has had a traditional lower importance in the German pension system due to the dominance of the first public pillar pensions, but as part of this reversal in the 2000s, promoting more diversification in pensions and longer employment, there have been numerous reforms, and the most known one is the introduction of so-called Riester pensions in 2002, which were kind of a state-subsidized investment into funds, which were not centrally administered by the states, but decentrally administered by banks and other institutions. And while this was very popular after its introduction in 2002, it has flattened in recent years. Nowadays, there's about 20.9 million contracts. That doesn't mean 20.9 million people, because many people may have different contracts actually, but it has flattened at basically this line. It even recently declined. So it's often considered not so much as a really success model in Germany. And reasons actually for this disappointing performances, one wants to put it like that, have been, on the one hand, the lacking ability to save, particularly for lower qualified employees, those with lower incomes, and the fact that this has been a very confusing pension pillar in a sense, because this decentral organization led basically to hundreds of different pension plans. And for people who are wanting to invest into such a pension, it's often very intransparent how they can invest their money. Bringing that together and looking at this additional pension, so second pillar pensions and third pillar pensions, on the one hand here, orange, the occupational pensions, and green, the Riester pensions. And here in this graph, it is split down by income groups, which makes it actually very clear how these pillars have been performing. We see that the Riester pensions, the private pensions, actually have remained comparatively modest in importance. They make up not more than 20 or 30% basically of older people. Only 20 or 30% of them are having such pensions, irrespective of the income. So they are rather evenly spread across different income groups. But where there is a strong differences in occupational pensions, which particularly those in lower income groups often cannot afford to invest in, or are not offered such pensions. While we can see in higher income groups, actually, it is a very large percentage that has access to this pension. So in a sense, the problematic situation of lower income groups in public pensions is even exacerbated, basically, if we look at additional pension savings in occupational pensions and Riester pensions. So actually, social inequality increases when we look at all three pillars jointly. I have to move a bit with regards to time, and we'll only shortly look at recent trends in pensions, and we'll look at public and occupational pensions, where there have been the most widespread discussions. In public pensions, Germany recently introduced a kind of a basic pension. At least this is what the German term Grundrente would translate into, if we would put it into English literally, but it doesn't mean actually a universal minimum pension, which is the kind of usage of the term which we generally have. So kind of a minimum pension everybody gets, but it is more kind of a means-tested supplement for a specific group, individuals with long working careers, but low pensions accrual. So people who have, for example, been working in lower paid jobs for a long time, they are getting this additional benefit, which then provides a kind of a basic pension for them, but this is far from being actually a universal program for all employees. Mothers' pensions are a very popular topic at the moment because they want to actually tackle gender inequalities in Germany by financing women and mothers for care time, providing them pension provisions for this time in which they were taking care of children. This has been introduced in 2014 in order to make pensions a bit more comparable for men and for women, and is also at the heart of discussions at the moment, where particularly the conservatives are thinking about improving this further. Occupational pensions are also considered as not being satisfactory in their performance yet. And in order to make their usage a bit more widespread also across different income groups, there have been discussions about including further employees outside collective agreements, for example, in small firms, more into this funds, improving savings opportunities also for lower earners, and making arrangements more flexible. So, for example, continuing to make contributions to it, even when continuing to work in older age. So there have been some reforms, even though one could argue these reforms have been rather incremental. So this brings me to the last point, the discussion about future reforms, that at the moment there are basically three different perspectives about how future reforms could develop. The first one is actually one of a very general reform in the German pension system, a suggestion which has been mostly actually made by particularly liberal social policy and economy scholars. The usual idea of liberal policies, further raises in retirement age, decreasing the replacement rate, and increasing reliance on second and third pillar pensions. On the other hand, more social democratic oriented pension scholars and economists are raising social justice concerns, whether such reforms can be actually offered to all labor market groups. So in Germany, we always talk about the so-called roofer. So a person basically repairing roofs which cannot work until 69, and for whom then different solutions might need to be found, and particularly also for, of course, the lower earning groups, which I referred to before. There need to be solutions for them so that they don't fall even back further in their pension outcomes. Finally, I said we currently have coalition talks. There's also a very skeptical view on the most recent reforms which are being considered in these coalition talks. For example, this mother pension idea and the idea of rather freezing pensions at age 67, which sound like not really oriented toward a sustainable future in pensions, but rather as clientelist policies for the typical target groups of either social democrats or conservative parties. But this is underway, and it's probably too early to say what comes out of it. But at the moment, it looks like we are still talking very much about discretionary reforms in the German system, while we still have big questions about the public-private mix in general. So thank you very much. and looking forward to the discussion later on.
Thank you ever so much, Dirk. That was really interesting, really detailed and informative discussion of a complex system. Had anybody got any points for clarification desperately they want to make here? No, can't see anything. The other thing I liked as well was the VW Beetle. Dirk, I've not seen one of those in a long time. I always remember my teacher at primary school having a beautiful orange one, so he brought back some nice memories of that as well. Okay, so thank you once again, Dirk. We'll move on to our final speaker, Trote Meijer, and then we'll have some time for some questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll try and, oh no, where's my, sorry, suddenly I don't find my slides.
Don't worry, don't worry.
Yeah, there. Yeah, they must have been pushed in the background. Yeah, can you see them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
All right,
Thank
good,
you.
good. So thank you for the invitation. And I'm talking now in a country where everyone sort of knows something about the UK pension system. And in relation, I think, to what we heard about Finland, which is a very state-based system, and Germany, which has been a strong state system, but has moved towards more voluntarism and greater reliance on companies for on occupational voluntary savings. The UK has actually done the opposite. It's been it has relied on voluntarism and on voluntary insurance for a very long time, but that didn't work, and then it made a turn. So that's what I will be covering. In the first part, I've done a lot of work on institutions and how they have changed in the years that I've been doing work on pensions. But I've also been very interested in the impact of institutions on outcomes. So I'm trying to combine both and put the UK pension system at center stage in a comparative perspective here. So what I want to do is first talk about the UK system and sort of say why it has moved from a liberal model to something that we may call beverage light. And then I want to show some of this evidence for this institutional change towards such a model in the UK, in the European context, but also reflect on what the link is between such institutional change, so pension reforms and outcomes. And then in the final part, I want to look at the evidence of outcome change. So how have in the reform process, what has that meant for the outcome for pensions in the UK, but also in other countries? So then, and I will conclude with the discussion. So let's look at the UK pension system and its institutions. So there is, I'm doing this very, very briefly by saying before 2010, Dirk, you went back to Bismarck. I mean, I think I can go, roughly speaking, a label of a liberal model, we can go, go back to that has a long history back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, and so on. Then where there was a heavy reliance on occupational benefits and employers providing these, but also a lack of coverage of the population. There is, in addition to a low state pension. So the state pension, which was the mandatory part of the British system, the basic state pension, consisted of a flat rate contributory benefit, which was entitled, the entitlement to that was limited. So it was earnings based, it was employment based, and people who didn't complete the full entitlements would be would only receive limited benefit, not the full benefits, but lower benefits. But even the highest benefit under the basic state pension was far below the poverty line, so very low. There was a time when there was a state earnings related pension to make up for this, and to allow people not covered in the occupational pension sector, and there are many, to accrue earnings related benefits. However, this was introduced fairly late in the 1970s, and it was then it had a diminishing role. It was later turned into the state second pension, and it never really played an important part. What did play a much more important part were occupational pensions. They were voluntary, so employers decided to offer them, and they were focused on the large private companies and the public sector where they were widespread. Yeah, they in terms of the quality of these, they were sort of as good as the German system, or probably the Finnish system as well. However, 50% of the workforce was not covered by these, and the private sector was less covered than public. And this was in the 1970s and 80s, and there has been a decline ever since. Private individual saving schemes were also there, and they were voluntary, but they played only a minor role. Always governments tried to increase this role, but that didn't really work. As a result of this system, means testing, the state means tested benefits for older people were significant, because there was the system just created a lot of poverty risks. And it became clear, this was at the after the Labour government came in 1997, that the system needed to change. Labour tried to save this liberal model, but it became clear that this wouldn't work. And so over time, during the Labour government, there was really a long reform process where all actors came together, and it was so clear that this system was exhausted and wouldn't work, and a cross-class coalition was formed by literally all the groups, including the employers, the national, the pension funds, the insurers. Everybody agreed that there must be a change. And what came out is something what one might call Beveridge Light, or yeah. So let's just go with that. But it's the basic state pension rises significantly. That is one element of it, but also the entitlement base has been broadened, so more people are covered. Care is much more generously recognized, and non-standard employment, etc. So as a result, this system has become nearly universal, has been called, and the earnings related element has been phased out. So it is now this bottom protection. In addition, the National Employment Savings Trust has been introduced, NEST, and that is an auto-enrollment system. It's everyone is enrolled automatically, and you can see it's been phased in. So this has come in over time, and contributions are also minimum contributions are mandated, and so it's now fully in place. And what this means is there is a general increase of coverage in the occupational sphere. However, if you look at the change in the liberal model, which is that the occupational pension sector that it used to be there and that was quite generous, has now declined. And and the benefits levels that were quite generous in the public sector and large private companies have also declined. So we have a broader coverage and more access. So this is the sort of conclusion here. What we see is a shift in the public-private mix from low public benefits, not enough coverage, and reliance on heavily regulated, increasingly regulated employers, but this lack of coverage towards increased state benefits for previously and underinsured, but loss of benefits for middle classes. So is this, what type of model is this? Is a question, but we may not, what is more interesting, I think, is the question of what the institutional shift means for outcomes, for the pensions of those affected. And this is our recent research that I have done together with Paul Bridgen, long-standing collaborator, and Lisa Davison from Stirling University. Paul is from Southampton. And what we've done here is we have looked at pension income change of two cohorts. One cohort of who retired at statutory retirement age in 1993 and 7. This is the group, and compared with the pension incomes of those retiring 2018 and 20 at statutory retirement age in 7 European countries. And how does their pension income relate to the institutional change that we see, so the pension reforms we see in the meantime? That was our question, and the title is Retrenchment Without Effect, which sort of indicates what we find to some extent. We measure here institutional change using the OECD Pensions at a Glance work, where they, you have used this as well, I think, Art, Ari, where we had the where pension systems are assessed using for 2002-2019 in this case. You take the rules and the regulations of both times, and then you use a hypothetical worker at average wages, and you work out what they would accrue under the conditions of 2002 and 2019, and relate that to average wages, and that gives you a sense of the generosity of the system under the rules of 2002 and 2019. So that's what we did, and then we compared this with the real individuals' incomes at 2 points in time, the earliest and the latest. And the countries you see here on the screen, these were the 7 countries for which such data exists in the Luxembourg income study. And we only, as I said, we only used those who were at normal retirement age at that time. And we expressed their pension level as a share of the average wage level. This was the relative pension level. So comparing the two should give us a sense of whether the generosity has changed. Yeah. I hope that is roughly clear. You're very welcome to visit our and read the paper. So do institutions and relative pension levels move in the same direction? What we see here is the institutional change This is the OECD's data. And if you look at the 2002 is on the left, 2019 is on the right, and then you can see the changes on the very right for our countries here, and these are the replacement rates. And first of all, with regard to the UK, you can see that the UK is lowest replacement rate wise in 2002 and 2019. So this system isn't generous, comparatively speaking. The second point I would like to raise, unfortunately, we don't have Finland in our group. I wish we had, but we do have Germany. So the second point is that we see strong decline in most of the countries. So retrenchment is the motto here, but not all. And the UK is the third. Decline is happening here as well, and but it's not as strong as it is in Poland or Greece. Now, okay, the question. So on this, what if we assume that this would be reflected in actual pension levels, then we would expect that individuals retiring in 2002 would receive higher levels. Real individuals would receive, by and large, higher relative levels than those retiring in 2019 in the countries where this is indicated institutionally. And I will look at the real levels in a minute, which are not as consistent with this expectation. But before I do that, just a brief reflection about the link between institutional shifts and shifts in outcomes. There is two problems are important. The one is the time lag of reforms, and the UK we can use as example Deborah Price, who's also a member of our group and who evaluated the Pension Commission's report at the time of these reforms I mentioned earlier, said the government will introduce pension reforms that will have some impact on pensioner poverty decades in the future, but almost no on current pensioners, and so on. So you need to bear in mind that that every change has its own dynamics in terms of when it lands and who it affects. And in order to know what is happening, we need to be very precise about the group. So generally having a whole age group and not cohorts will muddy the waters quite a bit. The second is that confounds it is labor market change. That if you compare the cohort of those retiring in 1993, say, and those in 2022, not only will the pension rules have changed, but also labor market behavior is quite different, and that affects particularly the gendered picture, where we see the greatest changes, of course. Okay, so that said, I just want to now, before I come to the conclusion, I want to show you our real pension outcomes using our full sample. So this isn't gendered, but first, and I'm not showing you the table, it's too long and too complex. So I'm just picking the main results here. Do visit, you can find it all in the paper. So if we look at pension adequacy and compare the UK, then the UK relative pension level, so of real pensioners, is consistently the lowest in the group at both points in time. Austria and Italy are top with 46 to 63% replace a real pension level. The UK is between 18 and 22%. So that is one thing. It's still adequacy is comparatively very low. In terms of dynamics between 1993 and 2020, the UK pension level rose, relative pension level rose significantly. despite the institutional retrenchment that we see in the OECD calculations. And the relative pension levels did not fall significantly in Germany and Greece, despite institutional retrenchment. It fell significantly in Austria and in Poland, and that was in line with the institutional retrenchment results. So as a conclusion, we can say that the UK's real pensioner income is lowest in the European context, and that evidence is in line with the liberal model. However, our institutional analysis is an institutional analysis alone is an unreliable basis if you're interested in pension outcomes. The UK relative pension level rolls against institutional expectations, and generally we find no systematic link between institutional change and change in relative pension levels in our sample. The reasons could be that the methodology is different, that, you know, the UK results could have been different if the nest had been included, if assumptions had been different. A reason is also that labor market behavior does affect savings power. So female increases, for example, could counterbalance harsher accrual rules, or men working longer, yeah, and that needs to be included. So the pension regime impact must be cohort sensitive and include the impact of employment change is our conclusion here. But at the same time, the UK is still, you know, it has still a lot of work to do to catch up in terms of adequacy. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Charlotte. That was excellent, and I totally agree that the UK's got a lot to do in terms of catching up. Has anyone got any quick points for clarification following that presentation, or shall we go on to the general questions? So I think what we'll do then is go to the questions. So if you either put your hand up or put a question in chat, and it'd be useful if you indicated if the question was for one of the individual speakers or if it's targeted at all of the speakers, please.